Daniel wrote that leaving the house did not end the experience, it merely changed its shape. For weeks after the move, Laura would wake in the middle of the night convinced she heard footsteps pacing just outside the bedroom door of their new rental. She knew rationally that the sound could be neighbors or settling wood, yet the rhythm was identical to what she had heard in the corridor of the old house, slow, deliberate, almost patient. Daniel, though only 4, began waking from nightmares screaming about a woman standing near a window, her face hidden behind her hair, repeating the same sentence again and again. Robert tried to dismiss it as trauma, something that would fade with time, but even he found himself checking locks repeatedly, glancing toward windows that reflected nothing but darkness. A few days after the move, Robert finally confessed to Laura what he had seen that night when he returned alone to the room. Until then, he had carried the image in silence, ashamed that fear had driven him to flee. When he described the floating figure, Laura broke down. The confirmation that she had not imagined any of it brought both relief and deeper terror. Wanting answers, Robert spoke to neighbors in the old Ivy Hill block, careful to frame his questions casually. The reactions were telling. Conversations stopped abruptly. Eyes shifted away. One elderly woman crossed herself and said the house had never been right since the girl died. Another man admitted that police had been called there multiple times over the years for unexplained disturbances, screaming heard late at night, tenants leaving suddenly without notice. Daniel learned later that a family who moved in months after they left experienced a tragedy of their own when their teenage son fell from the rooftop while flying a kite. The boy survived long enough to tell doctors he had been pushed, though no one was ever charged. The house was vacated again soon after. Daniel explained that his mother never to that neighborhood. Even passing near it caused her to feel dizzy and short of breath. As for him, fragments of memory returned as he grew older, sharpened by stories whispered at family gatherings. He remembered laughing at nothing as a toddler, remembered staring into empty corners of rooms, remembered the sensation of falling though no one had touched him. These memories followed him into adulthood, surfacing during quiet moments when he least expected them. Daniel stressed that he did not believe the spirit was evil in a simple sense. He believed it was furious, trapped, and deeply aware of its isolation. The daughter had been denied agency in life and abandoned in death, her room locked, her existence erased. In Daniel's view, the haunting was not random cruelty but a desperate demand to be acknowledged. He wrote that what frightened him most was not the violence, but the intelligence behind it. The entity knew when adults were absent. It chose moments of vulnerability. It spoke clearly, issuing warnings, making bargains. Daniel said that over the years he researched similar cases across the United States, houses where suicides were hidden, where grief was buried rather than addressed. He noticed patterns of aggression toward children, toward families, toward anyone attempting to create normalcy within walls that refused to forget. He believed the house in Ivy Hill was one of many, unmarked, unlisted, rented cheaply to those who needed them most. Daniel's father passed away years later, never publicly speaking about the incident again. Laura, however, carried it until the end of her life. On her final days, she reportedly asked Daniel if the woman was still angry, if she had finally found peace. Daniel had no answer. He wrote the email because his own child had recently described seeing someone standing near their bedroom window, someone who disappeared when the light was turned on. Though the new house had no history, no locked rooms, no tragic past he could uncover, the fear returned with startling familiarity. Daniel wanted to know if trauma could echo across generations, or if some things, once noticed, never truly let go. He ended by saying he did not want sympathy or attention, only acknowledgement. He believed that telling the story asked less of the living than silence demanded of the dead. He attached a single photograph to the email, an old, faded image of a narrow corridor with 2 doors, one open, one closed, taken shortly before they left. Daniel claimed that when he first found the photo years later, he noticed something he had not seen before, a faint distortion near the closed door, a shape that did not belong to shadow or light. He could not explain it, only say that seeing it made his hands shake the same way they had when he was 4 years old. Daniel concluded by warning that some houses are not empty when they appear to be, and some rooms are locked not to keep people out, but to keep something in. Daniel ended his account by explaining why he had waited so many years to finally send the email. He said that time has a way of dulling fear, but it never truly erases it, and certain memories remain untouched, preserved in the exact emotional state in which they were first formed. As an adult, Daniel tried to live a normal life, building a career, raising a family, convincing himself that the events of 1987 belonged to a distant, irrational past shaped by childhood vulnerability. Yet every attempt to rationalize the experience failed whenever he returned to one unavoidable truth: multiple people had witnessed the same presence independently, described the same voice, the same threats, the same calculated timing. Hallucinations do not coordinate. Fear alone does not create shared details. After his mother's death, Daniel found an old box of documents while sorting through her belongings. Inside were rental receipts, handwritten notes, and a small folded piece of paper he had never seen before. It was a letter his mother had written but never sent, addressed to no one in particular. In it, she described the house, the corridor, the locked room, and the certainty that the girl's anger was not fading but growing stronger with each family that tried to ignore her existence. Laura wrote that what terrified her most was not the attacks, but the moments of quiet, when the presence simply watched, learning their routines, their weaknesses, their fear. She believed the spirit wanted recognition, not prayer, not removal, but acknowledgement of the injustice done to her. Reading this letter decades later caused Daniel to understand that silence had only deepened the wound. He returned to Ivy Hill one final time before writing the email, standing across the street from the house as an observer rather than a victim. The building looked smaller than he remembered, more ordinary, almost harmless. The trees were still there, their branches twisted and heavy. The upstairs windows were dark. According to local records, the property had changed tenants repeatedly, none staying longer than a year. Some stayed only weeks. Daniel did not approach the door. He said he felt that entering again would be an invitation, one he was no longer willing to extend. That night, after returning home, Daniel's child described the woman near the window again, but this time added something new. The woman was not angry, the child said. She was watching, waiting to see if they would leave. Daniel realized then that the fear had not followed them physically, but psychologically, carried through memory, reinforced through storytelling, passed unknowingly from parent to child. Or perhaps, he admitted, that explanation was simply easier to accept than the alternative. He wrote that he does not claim to understand the mechanics of haunting, nor does he pretend to know whether spirits attach themselves to places, people, or moments of unresolved trauma. What he knows is that the house in Ivy Hill taught him a lesson that no education ever could, that ignoring suffering does not make it disappear, and burying truth often gives it sharper teeth. The daughter's room had been locked, her name unspoken, her death treated as an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. In doing so, her parents sealed more than a door. They sealed anger, grief, and abandonment into the walls of that house. Daniel ended by stating that he no longer fears the woman he once saw through his childhood memories. He fears repetition. He fears how many houses like that still exist across the country, rented cheaply, histories unshared, pain undisclosed, waiting for families desperate enough to accept silence as safety. He wrote that if telling this story prevents even one family from dismissing their instincts, from ignoring unease for the sake of convenience, then reliving the fear was worth it. The email closed without a signature, only a final sentence typed slowly, deliberately, as if each word carried weight. Some places remember what people try to forget, and when they remember, they demand to be heard.